guys, what's going on? So what I wanted to talk about today was, for those of you who are thinking about getting a bird or getting a new bird, which would be better, a budgie or a cockatiel? Now, regardless of which species of bird you get, I think the biggest consideration and what might make the biggest difference in the temperament of your bird is whether or not you get a hand-raised one. Now, hand-raised birds, as the name suggests, are hand-raised by humans from the moment they're born. So they're very attached to humans, they're very comfortable around humans, and they have very little fear of humans compared to birds that are raised by a bird mother. For us, Pearl was a hand-raised cockatiel, while Pillow was a store-bought budgie. So Pearl is much more affectionate, she's much more cuddly, while Pillow tends to keep to himself. Although for a store-bought budgie, he is very playful and very comfortable around us, but he doesn't like to be touched and cuddled in the same way that Pearl does. He sort of keeps to himself in that regard. So regardless of what type of bird you get, having a hand-raised one could make a big difference in whether or not you have a bird that is very cuddly and teddy bear-like versus a bird that keeps a little more to themselves and a little more independent. So obviously the pros to getting a hand-raised bird, like I said, they're more cuddly, they're more affectionate. The downside to hand-raised birds is actually the same thing as the upside. They are very cuddly, and this can be distracting sometimes. If you're trying to do work, you're trying to move around, you're trying to get stuff done, and you have a bird that's constantly on you all the time. While it is adorable and sweet and wonderful, it can also be a little bit of a pain. The other downside to a hand-raised bird is cost. Hand-raised birds cost significantly more than non-hand-raised ones. We got Pillow at the pet store for about 20 bucks, and we have seen hand-raised budgies for sale for well over $100. So there can be a significant price difference there. So now when it comes to the species of birds, hand-raised versus non-hand-raised aside, I'm gonna go over some of the pros and cons of cockatiels and budgies. Pearl is much louder than Pillow. She, still up for debate, has a much louder call. Hi. Pillow tends to just chirp and kind of warble and sing, and Pearl has a very loud, distinctive call. Now, obviously, the more birds you have, the more noise you're probably going to have. Birds are flock animals, they like to communicate with one another, and if you have one bird, chances are they're not going to be quite as vocal as if you have many birds who are talking to each other all day long. So another issue is expense, and I've already gone over this in terms of hand-raised versus non-hand-raised birds, but even in terms of species, cockatiels tend to be much more expensive than budgies. They're larger, they're not as common, they're a little more exotic, and they simply cost more. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on where you live in the world. Birds like this are rare in some parts of the world, more common in others, so prices are going to fluctuate drastically depending on that. So also in regards to expense, aside from the actual bird itself, is everything that comes along with it. The cage, the toys, the food. When you have a larger bird like a cockatiel, they need a larger cage, they need larger toys, they eat more food, and everything is more expensive. Those costs add up after a while, so your cockatiel will cost you more in the long run. So another issue is work and care. With a larger bird, there is simply more mess, their poops are bigger, there's just more to do to clean up after them than a smaller bird. Now that's not to say that smaller birds aren't messy as well. With birds of all sorts, there's feathers and there's seeds and there's poops, and there's just all kinds of things to be taken care of. There's just more of them with a larger bird. Safety, because cockatiels are larger, they have larger beaks, larger claws, they weigh more, they're simply bigger birds, and because of that there is a slightly more chance of injury coming from these birds. So both cockatiels and budgies are soft-billed birds. Neither one is going to take a finger off the way a giant macaw could or a cockatoo, but because cockatiels have larger beaks, if they do bite you, it can hurt a little bit more. Pearl has a larger beak. She nips sometimes. Most of the time this is actually for attention. When she wants to be petted, she'll sit on my shoulder and kind of nip at my face or nip around my mouth, trying to get me to kind of lean over and give her cuddles. This can be uncomfortable sometimes. She has never broken the skin, has never bit to the point where it truly hurts. But with that larger beak, she certainly has the potential to really get a good pinch in there if she wants to. I personally have been bitten by Pillow, I believe twice, where it's actually hurt. We've had him for 2.5 years. He's not a biter at all. Just once or twice he got a little cranky for some reason. I put my hand up and he nipped me to the point where it actually hurt. He's never broken the skin. I think his beak is too small for that, and he just doesn't have enough force behind it. The same thing goes with claws. Cockatiels have larger feet, larger claws. They can dig into you a little bit more. They weigh significantly more. I'd say Pearl weighs 3 or 4 times what Pillow weighs. Pillow is like a featherweight, no pun intended. While Pearl, when she lands on you, you can definitely feel it. So these are both small birds. So for adults, the size difference isn't a huge deal. If you have very young children, top babies or toddlers or very little kids, the size difference could be a bigger deal. So you will want to take that into account when you're considering what kind of bird to get. Another issue that could determine your bird's temperament, regardless of what sort of species it is where it came from and how old it is. If you adopt a bird, you don't necessarily know what that bird's history is or where it came from or what sort of potential traumas it could have had in its past. Whereas if you get a baby bird, say from a breeder, chances are it's coming with very little baggage. The other issue is how old the bird is. Again, a baby is not going to have many issues, whereas an older bird, whether or not it's gone through any sort of trauma in its life or not, it could simply be set in its ways. Maybe it was living with a very kind, nice owner who had to give it up for whatever reason. It had a schedule and a way of life with that person, and so coming into your house, it could take more time to adjust. So those are some things to take into consideration when you're deciding which type of bird to get. Let us know in the comments below what type of bird you want, or perhaps what type of bird you have, and how you've gotten along with that bird. Did you get a hand-raised one or one from a pet store? Have you had any problems with your bird? Let us know in the comments below. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.